A few weeks back, I asked subscribers to my newsletter to send me a quick clip of them speaking Spanish for me to analyze on a YouTube video like this one. So here we are. Today I'm going to analyze 3 short clips. We're going to look at what they did well, what they could do to improve, and how you can apply these tips to your own Spanish, even if you don't feel like you have an ear for the language. But first, let me mention one thing, and that is that there's nothing wrong with having an accent. We all have one. What we're looking at here is pronunciation, which is a little bit more objective. Accent refers to the regional flavor of the way that we speak, while pronunciation refers to the norms that exist in Spanish that you can abide by to make your Spanish as clear and easy to understand and natural sounding as possible. So let's listen to the first recording. This is Maddie from Australia.
Ahora estoy en Escocia. Soy voluntaria en un hostal cerca del lago Ness, porque estoy intentando viajar lentamente.
Great job, first of all, on a number of things. With the vowels in certain positions, you sound really, really Spanish, like en un hostal, en un hostal. You also have the Spanish L in this phrase, which is great. You also did a good job correcting estoy voluntaria to soy voluntaria, not pronunciation, but worth mentioning nonetheless. One thing I hear that you could practice in this first phrase is lago, the G in lago, cerca del lago Ness. And that's because what I heard was a hard G, lago, lago, but the G in Spanish is very soft when it's between vowels, as in fuego, agua, sigo, or lago. It's closest to the g sound when we say the word sugar really quickly. Sugar, sugar. You kind of skip over it, you don't do a hard g. You want to take that sound and apply it to Spanish.
Ayudo con limpieza y recepción.
Okay, one thing that you can work on here is the letter D in ayudo. It's good for the D in Spanish to be really soft, in particular when it's between 2 vowels. Ayudo, ayudo, rather than ayudo, ayudo. So we in English, we have a harder D as in dog or done. But in Spanish, we've got a much softer D, so it's closer to the sound from then or there. Take that the and practice it in the word ayudo. The next thing is with limpieza. There are 2 things here. The second syllable in limpieza is just 1 syllable. It's not 2. What I heard was limpieza, limpieza. This goes with any word with that particular letter combination. Pie, pieza, limpieza. So it's just going to be, rather than pie or pieza, it's pie, limpieza. The next thing is the s, which I heard as z. So rather than limpieza, limpieza, it's limpieza, limpieza. So the z in Spanish is never quite like the z in English, as in zebra. It's always very s, closer to the s sound from summer or salt. Later in this video, I'll give you some specific tips to practice these sounds and the others that we'll cover. All right, let's listen to the next clip, which is from Brian from the US.
Y también he vivido en el estado de California por 25 años.
Okay, just a couple of things that I hear. The first of which is the letter D, which we've already addressed in this video, and that is that when you say a word like estado, estado, el estado de California, that D sound should be pretty soft. When it's between vowels, it's going to be more like a the sound. So you can practice that in phrases like he vivido en el estado de California. You can just take this whole phrase and practice that over and over, working on softening those Ds. He vivido en el estado rather than he vivido en el estado. The next thing would be in the word también, también rather than también, también, which is what I heard. So this sound, this dragged out is common in English, so it's natural to apply it to Spanish. But what you want is a lot more of a shorter ta, también, también. So practice that. It's kind of like the sound you would make if you were going to the doctor.
Me mudé de California a Florida en 2009 y actualmente estoy jubilado y disfruto estudiar español todas las mañanas.
All right, great. There are a couple little things that I hear in the word nueve as in 2009. The word nueve is just 2 syllables, not 3. I heard nueve, but instead you want nueve. This goes for other words too, like bueno rather than bueno, or nuevo rather than nuevo. Bueno, nuevo, nueve, and so on. Another thing that you could work on would be the letter L as in actualmente, actualmente. I heard more of a very soft, kind of hard to hear L that would be common in English. The L in Spanish is never really hard to hear. It's always more of a, I like to think of it as a pointy sound. It's the tip of your tongue touching the roof of your mouth. Actualmente, rather than actual versus actual, al. And that L sound appears constantly in Spanish, so it's one that's definitely worth practice. Now let's listen to the next clip, which is from Richard from the US.
El Califa es otra de las conocidas taquerías de Ciudad de México que se especializa en tacos al pastor.
All right, there are a couple of things that Richard does especially well in this first part of the clip. First, the vowels are pretty Spanish sounding throughout. They're also nice and short. So we've got accurate vowel sounds, and he's not dragging out vowel sounds as we are prone to do in English, but instead keeping them pretty consistent throughout. He also does a really good job with the D sound, the D, as in Ciudad de México, Ciudad de México. One thing to work on would be just connecting more of the words. So in a couple instances, I heard es otra, for example, es otra de las taquerías, and in se especializa, se especializa. So in those two instances, most of the time Spanish speakers will let the two words run together. Es otra de las taquerías. Rather than es otra. And rather than se especializa, you'll get se especializa or se especializa.
Esta taquería sirve sus tacos con cebolla, cilantro y una rodaja de piña, que es la manera tradicional en Ciudad de México.
A couple little things in this clip. First is the word taquería, which I heard tacaria, tacaria. This is really common for people to take the vowel of the first syllable, I hear this all the time, and apply it then to the second syllable. It's kind of just, I think, a symptom of getting a bit tongue-tied when you're speaking, which is totally natural when you're speaking a foreign language. It's just something that you got to practice and be aware of. Esta taquería rather than esta tacaria. Next was the word rodaja, rodaja, which you said pretty well, but it just sounded like it was a little bit hard to say. Like you felt tongue-tied while saying it. And when you come across a word like that, it's good to not ignore it and try to work your way around it, but instead face it head on and take that word as kind of like a challenge for the day and just repeat it to yourself over and over in the short phrase that you found it in. If you need to hear audio examples of a phrase like that, you can go to Google's AI, which has really nice sounding audio, and just type in the phrase and then hit the play button.
Una rodaja de piña.
The last thing I noticed was in the phrase ¿qué es? As in, ¿qué es la manera tradicional en la Ciudad de México? What I heard was ¿qué es? ¿Qué es? This is, again, really common among English speakers to add a Y sound to the end of the letter E. So rather than que, it's que. So in a phrase like ¿qué es?, what a Spanish speaker will do most of the time is, first of all, there won't be any additional vowel sounds in it, so there won't be an A sound or anything like that. It'll just be que, And then since the next word begins also with an E sound, they'll combine those two words into one longer run-on word, ¿qué es? ¿Qué es la manera tradicional? ¿Qué es? Rather than ¿qué es? ¿Qué es? ¿Qué es? You might be inclined to try to take all of these tips and work on them at once, but that would be a mistake because there's only so much that you can change and really work on at a time. Instead of trying to work on everything at once, just pick one sound or one tip and work on incorporating that into your Spanish before moving on to the next. So whether that's shortening your O's or softening your D's or linking more sounds together, whatever it is, give yourself time for those changes to take place in your Spanish, because it's not easy to incorporate new sounds into the way that you're speaking a foreign language. If you don't know where to start or what sound to work on or how to pinpoint sounds that you could improve, check out the first link in the description below. Once you've chosen an area to focus on, there's another mistake that's really important to avoid, and that is only practicing these sounds in isolation. That can help at first, but really quickly, really as soon as possible, you want to be practicing them in context. To get the context that you need, just take any piece of Spanish that you're learning from, take a short little phrase that includes that sound that you're practicing, and repeat that phrase to yourself throughout the day, over and over, focusing on the one sound or technique that you're trying to build into your Spanish. Ideally, this context should be memorable so that it's easy to repeat to yourself throughout the day. And what better way to do that than with this catchy song right here?